Hi everyone, this is part one of a two-part mini lesson on effective assessments. In part one, we will explore what we mean by unpacking standards. In part two, we'll connect that work to creating assessment tasks. Let's get started by making explicit why the process of unpacking standards is critical to effective assessment. First of all, standards describe the content, process, and performance level for learning. In other words, what we teach and therefore what we assess. Each type of learning target requires different pedagogy, instructional strategies, or methods and assessment. If we aren't sure about the level of cognitive demand or exactly what it is we want students to do, we might not be choosing the appropriate pedagogy, instructional strategies, or assessment tasks. When we talk about meeting the standard, what we're talking about is providing evidence of learning. What is the evidence that shows us that students have met that standard? And consequently, we have our spoiler alert here at the bottom of the slide. Standards must be unpacked and assessments designed before the learning targets are planned. The outcomes for this part of the mini lesson is to do a very quick review of backwards design, learn the three components of standards and do some practice unpacking standards, and then create student-friendly learning targets based on those standards that you unpack. So when we look at the backwards design planning model, and this is from Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague, we have three stages. We see that we have three stages. Stage one has two parts. First, identifying the components of the standards, or in other words, unpacking them. And the second part is to determine the level of cognitive demand within those learning targets. Stage two also has two parts. In stage two, we specify what evidence would verify for us that students have met those learning targets. We're going to call that evidence criteria for success. And the other thing that we'll do in stage two is we will choose or compose an assessment task or question to measure all or part of the learning target. Stage three is to design the actual learning experiences aligned to the level of cognitive demand in the learning targets. Please note the little message there on the bottom next to stage three, or number 5 in our process. Designing the lessons or the learning experiences is the last step in backwards design, although where we often begin planning. First, we'll consider those three components of a standard. And here they are. What Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague call those three components are actually demands on the learner. The first is content. What must students know? What is the knowledge needed? The second is process. What should students be able to do? And the third is the performance. How well must students do it, and in what kind of complex performance? We have some examples here to share with you. We have actually 4. We have literacy, mathematics, visual arts, and PE. They're all at 3rd grade. I chose them that way so that they would be the same grade level. And what I'm going to say about this is that I'm going to talk through each one of them individually very briefly. But what you can do is you can go to the one that is relevant for you. Because what we're going to be doing later is I'm going to ask you to do some unpacking of your own standards based on your course project. So you might want to go to the subject area that you're going to be working with. So I'm going to start here with literacy. The standard is to write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, descriptive details, and clear event sequences. Establish a situation and introduce a narrator, use dialogue, use temporal words, and provide a sense of closure. I have color-coded this standard for you so that you can at a glance see what is the content, process, and performance within this standard. The content is to know and recognize narrative writing. The process is to use effective technique, descriptive details, and a clear sequence of events. The performance level is to establish a situation and narrator, include dialogue with descriptions of actions, thoughts, and feelings, use temporal words to signal order, and provide closure. There's a lot packed into that standard. For math, we have use multiplication and division within 100 to solve word problems in situations involving equal groups, arrays, and measurement quantities by using drawings, equations with the symbol for the unknown number to represent the problem. So the content, once again, it's all color-coded, is purple. Know what it means to multiply and divide. The process is to use arrays, equal groups, and measurement quantities to perform multiplication and division. The performance is to accurately solve word problems, so accuracy, solve these problems contextualized within word problems, numbers up to 100, and represent the solution path with drawings and equations, including the unknown quantity. For visual arts, the standard is apply criteria to evaluate artistic work. The A underneath the standard is evaluate an artwork based on given criteria. The content is to know the criteria and what they mean. The process is to be able to determine if criteria are present or not. In other words, evaluate. The performance is apply all of the criteria to an actual piece of artwork, a holistic evaluation using the criteria. The next one and final one is physical education. And the standard is dribbles and travels in general space at slow to moderate jogging speed with control of ball and body. The content is know what it means to dribble a ball. The process is dribble and dribble while traveling or moving. The performance or level of performance is to dribble with control of the ball and body at a slow to moderate jogging speed. Now it's your turn to try unpacking a standard. What I want you to do is choose a standard or a set of related standards that you'll include in your course project lessons. And I want you to identify these three components or demands by using these prompts below. There's a Google Doc attached to this assignment. Please use the Google Doc. It will prompt you to make a copy first, and you don't need to send it back to me. Just keep it because you're going to be using it throughout the rest of part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to continue the video, but I'm going to ask you to stop, to pause it so that you can do this now. And when you're ready, when you're finished, come back to the video and it will pick right up at this point. So the next step after we have identified the components in the standards is to determine the cognitive demand. There are many taxonomies and leveling tools available to determine cognitive demand of learning expectations. But here's a little hint. Stick with the same taxonomy or leveling tool so that you can make your planning easier. As you get to know the tool very well, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this. It will become a lens through which you see your standards. So the three that I've included here are depth of knowledge from Webb, the Bloom's Taxonomy revised, and Wiggins and McTeague 6 facets of understanding. There is additional information available in the additional resources for this module and the readings. So if you feel like you need to know more before you're able to use one of these leveling tools or a different one, please take time to go and read one of the articles that we've included for these three different leveling tools. Otherwise, what we want you to do is try it. So once again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and to actually determine the level of cognitive demand for each of your learning targets and add it to your Google Doc for this task. So once again, please choose a taxonomy or leveling system. If you need additional information, go to the readings in the additional readings for the course, for the module, excuse me, and take a few minutes to read up on the one that you choose. And when you're ready, come back and we have one last section in the module to finish up. Now, let's turn the standards the learning targets that you've written from the standards components into student-friendly learning targets. So why do we need to do this? Well, explaining the intended learning in student-friendly terms at the beginning of a lesson is the critical first step in helping students know where they're going. Students cannot assess their own learning or set goals to work toward without a clear vision of the intended learning. When they do try to assess their own achievement without understanding the learning targets they've been working toward, their conclusions are vague and unhelpful. So let's take a look at a few examples. I used the same examples that you looked at previously. So I took the process level from each of our examples and turned it into a student-friendly learning target. So the first one for language arts says, I can write a narrative with descriptive details and with the events in order. For mathematics, I wrote, we will learn to multiply and divide using arrays and equal groups. For the visual arts, I said, today I will learn how to decide if artwork has certain criteria or characteristics. For PE, the student-friendly learning target says, our goal for this week is to be able to dribble the ball and jog at the same time. Please note that I used a different frame around each one of them. That is really unimportant if you use I can or we will learn or our goal. It doesn't matter. This should fit your style. The important thing is that you have a really well thought out learning target and that you are sharing it with students. So now we have oops, I'm so sorry. Yes, forgive me. I thought I skipped something. So now we have one last you try it. What I want you to do is go back to your Google Doc, and now I want you to add the student-friendly learning target to the other pieces that you have already included. This concludes this video, so I am going to say thank you. And in the heart of the matter, part 2, we'll write assessment tasks for the learning targets. But before you go there, take a few minutes using your unpacked standards and create your own student-friendly learning targets appropriate for the learning and the age of your students and include them on your Google Doc. And remember, excuse me, we'll be using that same Google Doc in part 2. You can do part 2 today or whenever you're ready. Thank you.